I was still wearing the dress I bought for the celebration. Midnight blue, silk, stitched with quiet pride. I had worn it for him. For us. We were supposed to toast the biggest moment of my life, the day I signed over the patent that took me 9 years and 2 heart attacks to perfect. $17 million wired to our joint account. I should have been trembling with joy, but I saw it. The subtle flick of his wrist, the quick dissolve of powder into my wine. He didn't even hesitate. I stared at the glass as he raised his own, smiling like a man in love. He had never smiled that sincerely on our wedding day. I lifted my glass too, but I didn't drink. Instead, I said something about needing a moment. I excused myself, calmly. My hands weren't shaking. My lips didn't stutter. I walked into the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the cold marble tiles. I could hear the faint clink of his glass, meeting the one I left behind. He drank. Mine sat untouched. Funny, isn't it? After 23 years of marriage, 3 miscarriages, and a mortgage I paid alone. It wasn't the betrayal that broke me. It was the ease, the comfort, the timing. He waited until I had something worth killing for. I sat on the floor for what felt like hours. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just remembered. Every look he gave the younger woman in our building. Every time he forgot my doctor's appointments. Every moment he called my work cute. Until it became worth millions. He never believed in it until he saw the numbers. And once he saw the numbers, he believed I shouldn't live long enough to enjoy them. That was the night I stopped being his wife. I stepped out of the bathroom with my smile stitched perfectly back into place. I poured the wine into the sink, rinsed the glass, and set it back. I told him I felt nauseous, too many nerves. I said. He offered to tuck me into bed. I said I'd manage. He kissed my cheek, like he had 1,000 times before. Just enough affection to pass for care, never enough to reach my bones. I lay in the dark and watched the ceiling fan spin until dawn. He didn't know that his mistake wasn't the poison. It was letting me walk away alive. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I simply walked away. The house sat on a quiet hill, the kind that caught the morning fog like it was holding its breath. We bought it before we had anything. Just a broken-down porch, sagging roof, and hope bigger than our wallets. He said we'd fix it together, and we did, mostly with my hands. I stripped the wallpaper with a butter knife, painted the nursery walls a soft yellow, not knowing we'd never need it. When he lost his job that first winter, I worked nights at the clinic and baked bread in the mornings, just to keep the house warm. Not the kind of warm you measure in degrees, the kind you feel in your chest when you hear laughter in the hallway. The kitchen used to smell like cinnamon. Our son had flour in his eyelashes once from helping me bake. He's 30 now. I don't think he's touched a rolling pin since. But back then, that room was alive. Music played from a cheap radio. We danced barefoot on linoleum floors. He watched us, once, smiling through a chipped coffee mug. Back then, I still believed in the kind of love you water and wait for. I thought loyalty was instinct. I thought building something with someone meant they'd never want to burn it down. The living room still had the dent from when he dropped the couch. During our first move-in, I never let the repairman fix it. It made the house feel honest, human. Now, I just see it as weight that was always falling in the wrong place. He wanted to sell the house 3 years ago. Said it was too big now, too full of old air, but I stayed, not because I couldn't leave, but because I couldn't stand the idea of strangers sleeping under this roof like it was just lumber and drywall. This house carried my fingerprints in every corner. My husband stopped sitting on the porch after his affair, said the view got boring, but I knew he couldn't face the swing I built with my own hands, or the memory of a younger US, drinking iced tea with sunburnt noses and too many dreams. It wasn't just a house, it was a monument. A tombstone for every version of me that died building this life. Now, the hallway light flickers like it's trying to speak. The bedrooms stay locked. The echoes don't belong to anyone but me. I still talk to the walls sometimes, not like a madwoman, like someone visiting old friends. It used to be filled with love. Now, it only remembered me. Love, for me, was never grand gestures or romantic speeches. It was waking up early to iron his shirts before a big meeting. It was sewing the same hem on his pants 3 times because he never remembered not to trip over them. It was skipping my own doctor's appointments to attend theirs, for fevers, for scraped knees, for nothing but a bad dream. I gave everything quietly, and they received it without ever looking back. When our son graduated with honors, I sat in the back row with tear-stained glasses. My name wasn't mentioned in the speech, only his father's. Thank you, Dad, for pushing me. but I remembered the nights. I stayed up testing him with flashcards, the bribes of chocolate milk, the whispering prayers over sleeping books. His father pushed him. I carried him. When our daughter got married, she wore a white gown I altered by hand. She wanted it tighter around the waist. I stayed up 2 nights adjusting seams. On the big day, she thanked her bridesmaids, her makeup artist, even her florist. Not me. Still, I smiled through every photograph. I was the ghost in the room who made it all possible. The money I made from my clinic side jobs went to their tuition. I never bought myself anything full price for 20 years. They wore name brands. I wore the same shoes until they cracked. They had birthday parties with ponies and balloons. I had quiet nights with leftovers and bills. When my husband wanted to start a business, I signed over the small inheritance my mother left me. I believed in him, even when he didn't believe in me. The business failed in 8 months. I never saw the money again. He never said thank you. But that's what love was, I thought. Giving without keeping score. Building without needing applause. Even when my patent finally took shape, I never called it mine. I called it ours. I let him sit in on investor meetings. Let him boast to his friends. Let our children think it was a joint effort, as if he had stayed up those long nights reading failed formulas and watching metal. He wasn't there when the prototype sparked and burned my hand. He didn't hold me when I cried over the 3rd rejection letter. But when the checks arrived, they all smiled like they'd won a prize. They took vacations with that money. He bought a new watch, a newer car. Our son asked if he could borrow some for a startup. Our daughter wanted a kitchen remodel. I didn't say no. They always came to me with open hands, and I always filled them, until one day, I watched him try to end my life for the last thing I had left. That's when I understood. They were never building with me. They were building on top of me. They didn't just take what was mine. They took what I built for them. The day after he slipped poison into my glass, I went to the bank, not to withdraw money, but to look, really look. For the first time in years, I paid attention to what had always been in front of me. I sat across from a young man in a tie too tight for his neck and asked for the last 5 years of account statements. I smiled like a curious wife, checking her balances. He smiled back like I was harmless. The paper trail wasn't long. It was loud. Withdrawals I never approved, large transfers labeled investment, and family gifts, a signature that looked like mine, but only from someone who'd seen it too many times. He'd been pulling money in small amounts for over a year, just under thresholds that would trigger alerts. Clever, but not clever enough. I moved next to the living room that night, opened the locked drawer he thought I forgot existed, and pulled out the dusty envelope of our will. It had been rewritten, pages added, clauses removed. The notary stamp was real, but the conditions weren't. The original will, which split everything between our children after both of our deaths, was replaced. The new version gave him control in case of my decline of mental faculties or sudden passing. I hadn't signed it, but someone had. He had copied my signature from the dozens of birthday cards I wrote over the years, and the lawyer who notarized it, his old classmate, a man I had met once during a barbecue, who had laughed a little too loud at my husband's jokes and called me the real boss of the house. I suppose I should have felt shocked, but there was only ice in my veins. I searched deeper, his office drawer, the garage cabinet, the folder hidden behind the water heater. What I found were receipts, emails printed and highlighted, handwritten notes with timelines and reminders. He had planned it, not just the theft at the end of me. I realized he had been grooming the children too, making me out to be forgetful, paranoid, whisper concern into their ears like poison of a different kind. I remembered the way my son had asked, "Are you okay, Mom? You've been off lately." Off? No, I hadn't been off. I'd been tired. I'd been used. But now, I was awake. I started taking pictures, scanning papers, sending copies to a safe cloud storage with a name no one knew but me. I called an old friend from college, the one who became a lawyer, the one I lost touch with when marriage swallowed all my time. She called me back in 10 minutes and said, "You sound like someone ready for war." I said, "No. I'm ready for peace, but I'll walk through war if I have to." The love was gone, the softness had died, but the mind, oh, the mind they always underestimated, was alive and sharp. They thought I was weak. They forgot who taught them strength. There was a shift inside me that morning, not a spark, but a quiet click, like a lock turning after years of rust. It didn't feel like rage. Rage is messy. This was clean, cold, clear. I didn't pace the floors or scream at the walls. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I used to cut their sandwiches into hearts, and I opened my laptop. The light hit my face differently now, not as a woman broken, but as one building a case. The first call I made was to Clara, my college roommate, the one who'd once talked me out of dropping out when I couldn't afford books. We hadn't spoken in years. Life and marriage had pulled us apart. But when I said her name, her voice cracked. "I always wondered if he'd ruin you," she whispered. "He didn't," I said. "He just reminded me who I used to be." She was a partner now at a firm, specializing in intellectual property and estate fraud. Within an hour, she had her team combing through old filings, property titles, and will registrations. Her tone wasn't friendly, it was surgical. While she worked the outside, I worked the inside. I hired a private investigator, not some shady man in sunglasses, a retired accountant with a memory like an elephant. She had helped women like me before. She called it quiet accounting. I called it salvation. Together, we mapped out everything. Every cent withdrawn, every fake signature, every meeting between my husband and that notary. We even traced digital footprints, texts, bank pings, calendar entries marked lunch that were actually meetings at law offices without me. Control returned to me like breath after drowning. I changed the locks, quietly. I updated the will, silently. I moved the funds, legally, and I smiled while doing it, not because I was happy, but because I was precise. He still kissed my cheek at night, still asked if I needed anything, still played the role of devoted husband. He had no idea the chessboard had flipped, that every move he made now, I had already planned a counter for. My children were next. I didn't confront them. I simply stopped speaking first. I waited to see how long it would take for them to call if they weren't asking for something. I'm still waiting. There was no drama in my revolution. No slammed doors. No tears, just an old woman sharpening her silence into a scalpel. People think revenge is about rage, about shouting in courtrooms and burning photographs, but that's just theater. That's for amateurs. Real revenge is cold, legal, documented, signed in blue ink, and sent by registered mail. By the time they realize what you've done, it's already over. I drank tea in the same cup they once mocked as grandma's favorite, and smiled when it clinked against the saucer. Revenge is loud only when done by fools. Mine would be silent. It began with small shifts, the kind that ordinary eyes miss, but mine were no longer ordinary. His credit card declined at his favorite cigar lounge. I know because the manager left a voicemail on our unaware that I had rerouted the billing. His voice trembled with discomfort, masking judgment behind politeness. My daughter's contractor walked off non-payment, he said. She cried about frozen funds and how the bank wasn't cooperating. I remembered the funds. They were mine once, and now they were just out of reach, sitting inside a trust she could no longer access without my signature. My son's startup collapsed within 3 months. He blamed the market, but I knew it wasn't the market. It was the loan I retracted, the one he had forged my name to approve. Clara made sure every transaction was unwound legally, quietly. No court battles, just documents, letters, technicalities. Clause 17b. Subsection 6, Poetic Justice, printed in 12-point font. I never had to raise my voice. The world did it for me. My husband started pacing at night. At first it was just restless tapping in the hallway, then muttering, then silence that clung to the walls like mold. He looked over his shoulder, even when the room was empty. He stopped using the study, said the air felt heavy in there. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the invisible presence of every paper. I'd moved without him knowing. He kept waking at 3 a.m., eyes wide, chest heaving, the same time he had once tried to log in to the old offshore account. He never knew I'd already changed the passwords. My children whispered in corners now. Meetings without me, accusations between them. The trust they had in each other borrowed, like everything else in their lives, began to splinter. One blamed the other for their losses. I watched as they tried to salvage what never truly belonged to them. Our family group chat, once filled with emojis and weekend plans, turned cold. My texts went unanswered, but that was fine. They had taught me the value of silence. I simply returned the gift. Outside, a storm rolled in every few evenings, rain tapping against the window like an old friend checking in. I used to hate storms. Now they felt like applause. The roses in the garden bloomed brighter this year. Strange, considering I hadn't touched the soil since spring. But maybe pain is fertilizer. Maybe silence is sunlight. Maybe nature knows when justice is near. In mirrors, I didn't see a victim anymore. I saw a shadow, quiet, watching, unblinking. Their world had started to crack like old porcelain, and I didn't lift a finger. They thought they'd buried me beneath years of use, silence, and soft smiles. They thought I would fade away in grief. They thought I disappeared. I was watching from the shadows. The knock came just after sundown, soft, hesitant, the kind that doesn't want to be heard by the world, only by the one person they once silenced. I didn't rush to the door. I let them wait. When I opened it, my daughter stood there, mascara smudged, hands clutched like a schoolgirl caught cheating. Her eyes scanned my face for warmth. I gave her a shadow. Behind her stood my son, taller than I remembered, but somehow smaller in posture. He had aged, not in years, but in weight, the kind of weight that guilt wraps around your spine until you bend. "We just wanted to check on you," she said, her voice too light, too careful. I stepped aside without a word. They sat in the living room like strangers, not like the children I once cradled after nightmares, not like the ones who used to race down the stairs Christmas morning, squealing about presents I wrapped at 2 a.m. He cleared his throat. She adjusted her scarf. "We've been talking," he began. "Things haven't been easy, Dad." "Well, he's not himself." I let the silence do the questioning. She jumped in. "We didn't know everything. He told us you were confused, that you'd changed." I studied her face. She wasn't lying, but she wasn't innocent either. "We're worried," she said, reaching for my hand. I didn't pull away, but I didn't close my fingers either. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice calm, unblinking. Their eyes darted to each other, to the floor, to the portrait on the wall, the one where we all looked happy, before they learned how to calculate the price of my love. "We just want things to go back," my son mumbled. "To how they were." "How they were," I echoed. "Before the forged signatures, before the silence, before they watched me shrink so they could stand taller." My daughter started crying, not the loud kind, the rehearsed kind, shoulders shaking just enough. No tears fell. "I miss you, Mom," she said. I didn't answer. "We were wrong. About everything," my son added, eyes glassy but dry. We didn't see what he was doing. They had come not for me, but for access, for favor, for what remained. But I had nothing left to give except space to let them speak. So I let them. I offered no tea, no warmth, just stillness. They fidgeted, expecting rebuke, begging for comfort. But I was done carrying other people's shame. Their words spilled out, carefully chosen but clumsily delivered, guilt peppered with justification, soft sobs marinated in entitlement. I let it all wash over me, not to mend, not to reconnect, only to remember, because one day they'd lie about this too. They'd tell others they apologized, that I was cruel, that I refused. Let them. I kept the memory exact, their tones, their eyes, their rehearsed pain. I didn't lash out. I didn't forgive. I listened, not to forgive, but to remember their tone. I had set the table before they arrived, not with tea or biscuits, but with folders, 3 of them, thick, labeled in my handwriting. When they walked in, my husband, my daughter, my son, the room had no scent, no music, no softness, just chairs, sunlight, and consequences. "Sit," I said. They obeyed, like children called to the principal's office. No one asked why. I opened the first folder and slid it toward him. Bank slips, every unauthorized transaction, every forged signature, a highlighted section showing the day he tried to move the last of the money into a private account. He glanced at it, then looked at me. "This isn't what you think," he said. "It's exactly what I think," I replied, voice even. My daughter shifted. "Mom, please." I opened the second folder. Printed emails, dates, messages exchanged with his lawyer friend, the rewritten will, the false claims of my declining mental health. I watched the blood drain from her face as she read, the line that declared I was no longer capable of handling financial matters. "That's not," she started. I didn't let her finish. "It's your handwriting," I said. My son leaned forward. "Why are you doing this now?" I looked at him. This boy I raised, who once cried when his pet rabbit died, who now signed away my home for a business loan I never approved. I opened the last folder. Audio transcripts, the recording from the night of the celebration, his voice, the pour, the sound of the glass, and the words, "She won't know. She never notices anything." My husband flinched. I said nothing, just let the words hang. Silence did what screaming never could. I stood slowly, walked to the window, and looked out at the roses blooming in the garden, then turned back to face them, not as their wife or mother, but as the woman they had underestimated one last time. "You will each receive a letter by the end of the week," I said. "My lawyer has already sent copies to yours. This house, the assets, the trusts, they've all been separated from your access." "Mom," my son choked, "where will we go?" "That's not my concern," I said. My daughter wiped her eyes. "But we're your family." I looked at her carefully. "No, Family doesn't do what you did. They sat in silence. No one moved. I walked back to the table, tapped the folders with my fingertips. This isn't revenge, I said softly. This is recognition. He tried to speak again. We were desperate. I know, I said. That's what makes it worse. The clock ticked behind them. The sun shifted slightly on the table, turning the paper a soft gold. I picked up the last page. The settlement terms. Everything documented. Every boundary drawn. I placed it in front of them, flat and calm. Let's discuss, I said, my voice smooth as silk. How you'll make things right.